Our next speaker in this panel is Rob Paral. Many of you know Rob. He's been around for a minute. We love Rob over at Great Cities Institute. He's been doing some great research, and it's particularly on refugee communities, and he's going to share with you. He spoke last year, gave us an update. He's here today to tell us else what's going on. But to introduce him is another one of our UIC Latino Research Initiative faculty affiliates, Professor Patricia Macias, who is also a fantastic researcher. Professor, and she will introduce you.
Okay, so Chicago has a long history of segregation. You all know this. It's one of the most segregated cities in the country. We've all lived it, we've seen it, we've breathed it. And so that history of segregation is tied up with the development of suburbanization, right? Of the development of the suburbs. And so the examination of Latinos with segregation has been documented in the research, but less is known until recently with the work that we've seen featured today about the suburbanization of Latinos. Our next speaker, Rob Paral, has been doing this important work. He is an expert on demographic changes in the Midwest. And so today, Rob, who's a senior researcher at Great Cities, is going to talk about where we are at in Illinois in terms of recent migrant arrivals in the cities and suburbs. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Patricia, and thank you, Teresa, and the UIC Great Cities staff. Congratulations on today's conference and on all the work and research that is so needed and is being done so successfully. Really glad to be a part of it. I've got some slides here. I'm going to talk about something a little different here. I am going to talk about what has happened to us in the last 24 months in Illinois of people arriving here primarily from Central and South America, essentially asylum seekers. And we all are aware of this story. There's so much we don't know about what has happened to us the last 2 years in Illinois in terms of this enormous population that has come here. And actually, I'm going to share a couple level-setting data items with you to say where we're at, but then really what I'm going to do, and this is just during 10 minutes, is talk about how much we don't know about what's going on, and how much we don't know about the lives and the welfare and the safety of the people that are here. Let's go to my first slide, please. Maybe I'll hold this in my hand. Oh, I'm controlling it. It doesn't happen by magic, like you just talk. Page down, I bet you page down works. Okay, just to share with you some level setting here over the last couple of years. Again, we've had the largest Latino migration to Chicago in the last 2 years in many, many decades. It has really completely upset the table. There's a whole different thing going on. It has little to do with everything we've talked about so far in some ways. There's something new going on here. So that in the last 2 years, we had 48,000 people arrive here, primarily from Spanish-speaking countries, Central America and South America. And 40,000 of them were sheltered at some point in the city of Chicago by shelters. An enormous operation got set up to make that possible, unprecedented. And the great majority of that sheltered population are from Venezuela, right? So 80% of the arrivals that came up on these buses from Texas sent by the Texas governor and went through this shelter process in the city of Chicago. In a minute, I'm going to talk about why that's only captures part of what's going on. You see my table on the right showing that Venezuelans are the great majority that we're talking about here. And then you see that graph on the bottom showing that during the course of this calendar year, it has really dropped off. The arrivals, going from like 400, 500 a week to recently just about 12 a week. And not much time to get into why that is. And whether that will continue or not, it depends partly on an election coming up, but also on other things. So that's kind of where we're at right now in terms of the southwestern border migration that has come to Chicago, okay? Now I want to talk to you about what we don't know about all of that migration. I have a little arithmetic table up here, and you see that on the top about 48,000 migrants have come through the shelter system, bussed up to Chicago, and currently there's about 5,000 in shelters still, okay? So subtract out those 5,000 from the 48,000, you have a lot of people, about 43,000 people. Where are they? Where do they live? What are the housing conditions they're in right now? How are their children doing? It's an enormous mystery. We don't have any information that's anything near to being broad-based, where we can really say anything about them. How many are still in Chicago? Or have made it to the suburbs or not? You get the picture, the scope, the enormity of not knowing anything. In a way, we know a lot about undocumented Mexicans. There's data. And there's a long history here. We can say things, and they have a supportive community. This is the most mysterious population you could talk about. And I hate to say mysterious about a population that's really fighting for its life, you know, and in great need. So, number one, where are they? Now, I've just talked about 48,000 people that came on buses, right? They're sort of easy to count because they were put on buses in Texas at the border. There are manifests on the buses. They arrive at a landing point in Chicago. You know, the counting is very good on that number, okay? And what this table is getting at is that, okay, this is as of last January. That's why you see a 35,000 number there. As of last January, there are about 35,000 migrants that arrived here. But Customs and Border Protection says that during the period just before that, it had apprehended or processed and released 63,000 people who were going to Chicago. They weren't on the buses. They didn't come here that way. It's a bigger population. So there's a bigger population coming here, and it's 28,000 extra people maybe. Not all of them probably stayed in Illinois, right? You might have told CBP at the border that you were going to Chicago, and maybe you didn't. But many more seem to have been coming here. And we know even less about them. That population, by the way, didn't have access to shelter, formal shelter, hasn't been processed in the legal services workshops that were set up by the state, hasn't gotten any of the housing assistance that at least some of the bused migrants had access to. Sorry, I can hear my voice fading away as I back up. So it's kind of a story of there's something going on here and you don't know what it is. You know, there's an old song like that. It's bigger than we realize. Okay, next point I'm going to make. There's a situation where of the folks who came on the buses and are in the shelter population, and that's on the right-hand column there, the great majority are from Venezuela. 4 out of 5. Got that, real easy. But when you look at the statistics on who's been apprehended at the border, who's coming here, who is the asylum-based, asylum-seeking population actually coming into the U.S., it's more diverse than that. So again, I'm going to take an example of the Guatemalans. There are almost no Guatemalans in the Chicago shelter system, which is really striking because there's plenty of Guatemalans fleeing Guatemala. The Guatemalans kind of have a story, this is for another topic, a little bit of a story like the Mexicans. There is a community here, there's a history here, there are relationships and jobs to possibly slot into. So they're flying under the radar to some extent. You won't see them in the shelters. And it illustrates that of the many, many people that are fleeing Central and South America today, it's not only bigger than we know from the shelter population, it's also more diverse than what we know from the shelter population that's been featured. So I'll stop there. And I just wanted to share with you how much we don't know about this enormous process, this enormous history, this enormous thing going on. about this enormous number of human beings. And we need to do so much. We need, first of all, we need to talk to them. We have not systematically talked to the migrants in the last 2 years. Surveys, interviews, focus groups, it hasn't happened yet. There's so much more we need to do to find out about their needs and talk to the service providers, et cetera. That's the next phase of immigration research and policy research involving Latinos in Illinois. So, okay, I'll stop with that, and I'll be happy to take any questions. And thank you so much, Patricia.